The woman on stage just collapsed.
The announcement sliced through the gala's music, panic erupting as executives froze under the chandeliers. The lead physician dropped his tablet, shouting for paramedics. Then the man who'd been servicing the backup generators, the one nobody noticed all evening, stepped forward without hesitation. Because he wasn't just a mechanic. He was the one who'd already given her a kidney months ago, unaware she was the billionaire hosting tonight. Before I show you the exact second his calm saved her life, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Beneath the luxury and noise, this is a story about connection, not power. Before the crowd learned who he was just the quiet worker everyone overlooked. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. He crouched beside the fallen CEO, 2 fingers on her neck, searching for rhythm beneath chaos. His hands were steady, movements clipped and precise, the muscle memory of someone who'd once counted heartbeats under fire, not in marble halls. Around him, panic scattered like spilled champagne. Inside him, stillness returned. They didn't know his name yet. The cameras would later. For now, he was just the man in the service uniform whose voice cut through hysteria. "Clear the stage, she's in shock. Get saline, not champagne." Earlier that morning, his day had been ordinary. The hum of engines, the clang of tools, and his daughter's laughter spilling from a cracked phone speaker before school. That was Callan Doran's rhythm. Fix what's broken, keep moving. He'd signed up for extra work at Langstone Dynamics because every hour meant another meal covered, another month's rent secured. He didn't know the woman he'd once helped survive the same way he'd help her tonight. Callan's workshop smelled of oil and rain when the hospital letter arrived months ago. Confirmation that his kidney had been successfully transplanted into a patient whose identity remained sealed. He'd smiled faintly, whispering a small prayer for whoever they were. Donating was the only decision he hadn't second-guessed since his wife died. She'd wanted him to stay kind, even when kindness cost more than he could afford. He'd told Mara, his 8-year-old, that sometimes people just need a spare part the way cars do. She'd drawn a picture of a heart split in 2 colors, half blue, half red, and taped it to the refrigerator. "So yours keeps beating somewhere else, too," she said. That drawing became his quiet emblem, folded into his wallet beside a photo of her. The Langstone contract had come through last month. Retrofitting hybrid vehicles, routine maintenance during the company's innovation summit. He hadn't known the CEO's name until he saw it printed on the visitor badge. Vera Langstone. He'd remembered it faintly from the news, wealth, awards, something about medical tech and market shares. When she'd passed him in the underground bay earlier, her pace brisk, eyes forward, he'd simply nodded. She hadn't noticed him. People like her rarely did. That evening, as the orchestra tuned and champagne poured, he'd stayed near the control room, checking voltage meters, timing backup circuits. Routine, predictable, until a technician's nervous call came through. Power draws fluctuating on level 1. He'd stepped out to investigate, the sound of applause swelling from the atrium above. Then, the scream. The shift from celebration to chaos was instant. Security shouted for space. Cameras tilted toward the stage. The giant Langstone Dynamics logo glared like an indifferent sun overhead. Callan climbed the steps through the crowd, eyes already scanning for medical cues. Pallor, collapsed airway, glassy stare. The doctor beside her fumbled with an unresponsive monitor. Callan's voice carried authority stripped of volume. "Roll her to her side. Keep her airway clear." He caught the startled look from the physician but didn't wait for approval. Years in combat had taught him that permission wasted seconds people didn't have. As he stabilized her breathing, The realization hit, a flash of recognition between the sterile lights and her still face. He'd seen her somewhere before, not in person, in a document. The transplant summary letter. Female, 43, high-profile confidentiality. A heartbeat stuttered under his palm. The crowd hushed. When the monitors finally revived, he checked her vitals one last time before medics arrived. He stepped back quietly, blending into the background again. No one noticed the small streak of engine grease on his sleeve, the same sleeve that had steadied her pulse. Outside, rain began tapping against the glass roof, a slow, deliberate rhythm, almost human. Callan exhaled for the first time in minutes. Somewhere behind him, the lead physician murmured, "Who was that guy?" He didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands, still trembling, and thought about the daughter waiting at home, probably drawing something new tonight. The headlines tomorrow would call it fate. But in that moment it was simply instinct, the same kind that had guided him when he'd signed a donor form months ago without asking for a name. What he didn't know, as security escorted him out of the glare, was that the woman he'd just saved would soon demand to meet him, and nothing in either of their lives would stay anonymous again. Morning light spilled through the workshop windows, cutting across coils of cable and half-finished repairs. He arrived before sunrise, coffee cooling on the bench, the same rhythm as always. Tools first, thoughts later. The local radio mentioned last night's gala and a mysterious Good Samaritan who'd acted before paramedics arrived. He didn't need to hear his own name. The story was already heavy in his chest. Mara's voice filled the silence through a voice note she'd sent before school. "Daddy, did you fix the big engines yet?" He smiled, wiped his hands, and pressed play again just to hear her giggle. The world kept running because of small sounds like that. He hadn't planned to step into chaos last night. He'd been near the stage only to inspect an electrical junction. Then the collapse happened, and his instincts took over. That was what service had done to him, carved reflex into bone. No one at the gala knew he'd spent years patching soldiers together under mortar fire. He never told anyone. It was easier to be the mechanic than the medic who couldn't save his own wife. The first time he'd seen Vera Langstone's face, it was on a news broadcast replaying the incident. She looked pale, distant, the kind of untouchable that the world built monuments for. Reporters called her the Phoenix of Langstone Dynamics. He turned the TV off halfway through. He didn't need to be reminded that the life he'd once saved anonymously now had a face and a fortune attached. At the shop, his coworker Wes dropped a wrench and grinned. "You see that broadcast? Looked like one of our uniforms on stage." He kept his tone neutral. "Lot of mechanics in this city. Yeah, but none who sound like a field sergeant yelling at doctors." Wes chuckled. "Whoever he was, guy's got guts." He didn't respond. Instead, he reached for the next job order. Langstone Dynamics Fleet Maintenance. Emergency check requested. The irony stung. The company whose CEO he'd saved was now sending him more work, unaware of who he was. By noon, a courier arrived with the paperwork. Callan flipped through it. Standard service form, corporate seal, signature, Vera Langstone. He stared at the ink, then set the pages down carefully, as if they could burn him. He remembered the hospital months ago, the quiet corridor before surgery. The nurse had thanked him for signing the anonymous donor waiver. "Your match is special," she'd said. "High-profile recipient. You sure you don't want to meet her?" He'd smiled softly. If she's alive, that's enough. He hadn't known that decision would circle back with such precision. When Mara came home that evening, she climbed onto the counter swinging her legs. They said on the news someone saved a lady's life. Was it you? He hesitated, washing his hands slower than necessary. Lots of people helped. But you always help, she insisted. You fixed Mrs. Hand's generator when the storm came. You gave your kidney. Mom would say you can't stop fixing things. He laughed quietly. Maybe that's all I'm good at. She frowned. No, you're good at making people not scared. He paused, towel in hand. That sentence sank deeper than she realized. The truth was, he wasn't fearless, just practiced at acting like it when others froze. Fear was background noise. Duty was louder. Later that night, he sat at the table, paperwork open, Mara asleep beside her coloring book. He reread Vera's signature and the corporate emblem embossed above it. For a moment, he pictured her face again. The faint tremor of her eyelids as he checked her pulse, the way her hand had brushed against his wrist before consciousness slipped. She hadn't looked powerful then, just human. Dr. Vale's call came unexpectedly the next morning. The hospital had referred the physician to verify post-incident documentation, and his name was on file from the donor registry. Mr. Doran, the doctor said carefully, I believe you were present during the CEO's episode. Just happened to be nearby, he answered. There's been recognition. Langstone's office wants to identify the responder for internal commendation. I'd rather stay anonymous. Vale paused. Understood, but she may insist. She's been asking questions about her donor lately. Kalen's grip on the phone tightened. She shouldn't know who it was. Perhaps, but the world isn't as discreet as our paperwork. He ended the call and sat in silence. The thought of their worlds colliding again felt heavier than any engine he'd ever lifted. She existed on magazine covers and shareholder screens. He existed under vehicles, grease in his hair, raising a daughter who thought art could fix hearts. Still, part of him wanted her to know, not for gratitude, but for understanding. Maybe, if she saw what her survival had built in his life, she'd realize generosity wasn't weakness. He folded Mara's heart drawing and tucked it back into his wallet. The edges were worn, colors fading. Half blue, half red, his own map of what was lost and what still beat somewhere else. When the work order came through, he didn't refuse. The next morning, he'd be at the Langstone Tower again, surrounded by the same glass and steel that had once ignored his existence. Only now, the balance between them was quietly shifting. She owed her heartbeat to the man tightening bolts in her basement, and he owed his peace to the decision she didn't know he'd made. Outside, rain began again, tapping softly against the windows. He exhaled, whispering to no one, just another day's work. But inside, something had begun to stir, a question that neither humility nor anonymity could quiet for long. Tomorrow, those two lives would stop existing in parallel. They would meet, and both would have to decide what to do with the truth that bound them. The Langstone Tower glimmered like a mirror to the city, its glass panels catching morning sunlight as if it owned every reflection. Colin parked the service van by the loading bay, scanning the ID scanner with the badge clipped to his uniform. The guard waved him through without eye contact, just another worker entering another day. That suited him fine. The fewer people noticed him, the easier it was to breathe. The maintenance order directed him to the sub-level garage, an area rarely seen by the company's executives. He preferred places like this, mechanical caverns where things made sense, where systems obeyed logic instead of politics. The engines, the circuits, the quiet hum of electricity, they all spoke a language he understood. While checking the diagnostics terminal, he heard footsteps, measured, deliberate, expensive. A woman's voice followed, crisp as static. Why is this vehicle still offline? She wasn't asking, she was demanding. Callan turned and found himself facing Vera Langstone in person. She looked exactly as she did on screens, impeccable posture, pale from recovery, eyes sharp as instruments. She stopped a few feet away, studying the car's open hood as though it had personally betrayed her. "This model was supposed to be ready for the demonstration tonight," she said. Callan kept his tone steady. "Battery isolation's failing. Someone bypassed the secondary relay. If I restart it now, the system could short." Her gaze flicked to his badge, then back to his hands. "So fix it." He almost smiled, not mockery, just recognition of a pattern. Power never asked, it ordered. "Working on it," he said simply. For a moment, silence hovered between them, punctuated only by the hum of coolant lines. She crossed her arms, impatience radiating like heat. "Do you always take this long?" He tightened a bolt and said quietly, "Only when people's lives depend on what happens after." The line slipped out without calculation. Something flickered in her expression, irritation mixed with faint curiosity, but she didn't reply. Instead, she turned away, pacing with that restless energy of someone unaccustomed to waiting. Behind her, two executives whispered about her stamina since returning to work. "She shouldn't even be walking this much," one muttered. "Doctor said she's still in recovery." Callan didn't look up, but he listened. The pieces fit, her slight tremor, the paleness under makeup, the fatigue behind precision. He felt an unexpected pang of empathy. She'd survived because of someone else's organ, and the kind of survival came with invisible strings: guilt, fragility, debt. He knew it too well. Vera turned suddenly. "What did you say your name was?" "Callan." "Last name?" He hesitated. "Doran." Her brow furrowed briefly, as if the sound brushed something familiar. "You've done work here before?" "A few times, mostly fleet retrofits." She nodded, distracted by a phone buzzing in her hand. "Fine, finish by noon." She walked off toward the elevator, heels echoing like punctuation marks on marble. When the doors closed behind her, Wes stepped out from a nearby stairwell, wiping grease from his hands. Was that her? Yeah. Man, she looks like she hasn't slept in a week. You think she remembers anything from the gala? Callan didn't answer. He was thinking about the faint tremor in her wrist when she'd gestured, the way her fingers had brushed her abdomen unconsciously, just below the ribs, near where a surgical scar might hide. He'd seen enough post-op patients to recognize discomfort masked as poise. Later that day, while testing the backup circuits, he noticed a flicker in the system, minor but concerning. He called Dr. Vale, listed in the maintenance contact sheet for medical compliance with certain vehicles equipped for emergency transport. The doctor answered quickly. "This is Vale." "Callan Doran," he said. "Found a low-voltage anomaly in one of your fleet cars. Might not be related, but it could cause electrical interference with monitoring devices if used near strong transmission fields." There was a pause. "You're with the service crew?" "Correct." Vale's tone shifted, cautious. "I've heard that name before. Probably from the work order," Callan replied, but the tension in his stomach said otherwise. The doctor exhaled. "We'll look into it. Appreciate your attention to detail." When the call ended, Callan leaned against the wall, watching the generator lights blink in steady rhythm. He wondered if Vale remembered the donor registry, the anonymized initials, the profile. Male, 40s, former medic. It wouldn't take much for those details to connect. As the day ended, Vera returned to the garage flanked by two assistants. "Did you finish?" "Yes, ma'am," Callan replied, closing the hood. "Everything's stable." She nodded. Her eyes lingered for a second too long, studying his calm posture, the steadiness of his breathing. Then she said something unexpected. "You were at the gala, weren't you?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "Maintenance duty." "I remember a voice," she said slowly. "Someone giving orders while I was down. It sounded like you." His pulse quickened, but his tone stayed level. "A lot of shouting that night, ma'am. Hard to tell who said what." For once, she didn't push. She simply looked at him with quiet calculation, the kind that didn't belong to suspicion but recognition she couldn't name. "Thank you for your work," she said, then turned away. After she left, Wes elbowed him. "You ever get nervous around people like that?" Callan shook his head. "No point being nervous. Everyone breaks the same way when things go wrong." That night, at home, he found Mara asleep at the table again, her pencil smudging the edge of her drawing. She'd added new colors, gold streaks between the blue and red halves of the heart. Beneath it, she'd written in uneven letters, "It beats in 2 people now." He sat there for a long time, staring at those words. Tomorrow, he'd have to return to the tower for system retests, and sooner or later Vera Langstone would realize the voice that saved her belonged to the man whose heartbeat she carried inside her. By the 4th morning, the tower's rhythm had begun to change. Security was tighter. Press vans gathered outside, and rumors swirled that the CEO was planning to unveil a breakthrough project during the upcoming Innovation Summit. To everyone else, it sounded like a routine corporate event. To Callan, it felt like standing inside a machine about to overheat. He arrived early, carrying his tool bag through the service corridor that ran parallel to the main lobby. The hum of electronics vibrated in the walls. The air smelled faintly of ozone. It reminded him of forward bases during desert storms, calm before the comms went dead. He pushed the memory away and focused on diagnostics, one switch at a time. Upstairs, Vera Langstone rehearsed her keynote alone in the glass auditorium. She spoke with precision, her tone steady but her breath shorter than she realized. Dr. Vale watched from the control booth, arms folded. "You shouldn't be pushing this hard yet," he warned. "I can't cancel," she said. "Investors expect proof that I'm still the engine driving this company." "Engines stall when they run without fuel," he replied. "You need rest." Her expression didn't waver. "I've already borrowed time. Might as well use it." Below them, Callan finished recalibrating a generator. When he keyed in the new output, the entire floor trembled faintly as the circuit synced. He checked his readings twice, then once more out of habit. The voltage was stable, the current clean. Still, he felt the prickling sense of something off. Tiny fluctuations that might mean nothing or everything. He logged the data and made a mental note to tell the facilities manager. Wes arrived late, yawning. "You hear the rumors?" "Which ones?" "That she's inviting media into the summit hall. Big reveal, probably some AI thing." Callan nodded without looking up. "As long as the power holds, it won't matter what they reveal." Wes laughed. "You talk like a guy expecting disaster." "Experience," Colin said simply. By mid-afternoon, he was summoned upstairs to check the stage lighting system. He didn't like working that close to the public areas. Too exposed, too polished. The elevator opened to a world of glass and gold accents, where even silence seemed expensive. He crossed the stage quietly, tools slung over his shoulder. Vera stood near the podium, finishing a phone call. When she hung up, she noticed him and gestured to the overhead rig. "Will those lights hold during the broadcast?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied, checking the panels. She hesitated. "You're the same technician from the garage?" "Yes." "Good. I prefer consistency." Her tone was businesslike, but something in her gaze lingered again. Half curiosity, half recognition she couldn't trace. For a heartbeat, he thought she might ask more, but she only nodded and returned to her notes. Dr. Vale joined her a moment later, murmuring something about her latest test results. Callan caught fragments, electrolyte imbalance, restlessness, post-surgery stress. He turned his attention to the control board, pretending not to hear. But the medic in him couldn't ignore it. The tremor in her hand had worsened since yesterday, a faint twitch when she reached for her water. After finishing the inspection, he walked back to the sublevel, uneasy. He'd seen soldiers ignore warning signs like that, pushing themselves until their bodies rebelled. He wanted to warn her, to say something human instead of technical, but she wasn't his patient and he wasn't her equal. He was the guy in coveralls who kept the lights on while she tried to prove she could outshine them. That night, Mara waited up for him, eyes heavy but stubborn. "You keep coming home tired," she said. "Work's busy," he replied, ruffling her hair. "You should tell them to let you rest too." He smiled. "Doesn't work that way, kiddo." She yawned. "Maybe they'll say thank you this time." He didn't answer. She didn't know that the people he worked for didn't see the kind of hands that kept their power running. The next morning, as the summit countdown began, Callan returned to double-check the systems. The generator's readings were perfect now, yet something about the airflow felt wrong. A dry heaviness that clung to his throat. He made a note to inspect the cooling system later, after the event. Upstairs, Vera rehearsed again under brighter lights, her voice echoing in the empty hall. The company's engineers adjusted microphones. Reporters tested cameras. Dr. Vale stayed close, his expression drawn. "Hydrate," he reminded her softly. She drank, but said nothing. Her reflection in the stage glass looked sharp but fragile. A figure composed of light, one good tremor away from shattering. From the balcony, Callan watched her step through the speech again. Her tone was steady, rehearsed, but her skin was too pale, her posture too rigid. He felt the same dread he used to feel before a convoy went out at dusk, knowing something would go wrong, but not knowing when. He turned to leave, but Vale caught his arm near the exit. "You're the one from maintenance, right? Doran?" "Yeah." "Keep an eye on the generator output during the summit. If the power dips even slightly, call me immediately. I'm running Vera's cardiac monitor through that same feed." Callan frowned. "Shouldn't you use an isolated line?" "Budget cuts, corporate oversight, you know how it goes." Vale sighed. She insists on being wired in quietly. Doesn't want investors knowing she's still recovering. That detail landed like a weight. "Understood," Callan said. As the doctor left, Callan looked back toward the stage one last time. Vera was still there, finishing her run-through, the lights bathing her in sterile brilliance. To everyone else, she looked invincible. But he could see the small tremor at her wrist, the uneven rhythm of her breathing. He exhaled slowly. The systems were ready, the circuits secure, but something far more fragile was about to be tested. Tomorrow, when the summit began, the balance between their worlds would finally break, and what came next would depend on whether instinct still remembered how to save her. The Langstone Innovation Summit began under a ceiling of glass and light, cameras suspended like mechanical eyes above the stage. Hundreds of guests filled the atrium, murmuring over champagne and murmurs of profit forecasts. From his post in the control booth, Callan adjusted voltage readings that glowed steady green across the console. On paper, everything was perfect. But perfection always failed when humans ignored fragility. Down on stage, Vera Langstone was poised before the podium. Tailored suit, flawless posture, confidence rehearsed to the second. No one in the audience could see how tightly she gripped the sides of the lectern. Her pulse, fed through the hidden monitor Vale had linked to the main system, flickered slightly higher with each sentence. Langstone dynamics exists to prove that progress and compassion can coexist, she began. The words came smooth, practiced. Innovation isn't about replacing people. It's about protecting them. Callan couldn't help noticing the irony. Behind those phrases stood contracts that had cost people livelihoods, including his wife's insurance years ago. He reminded himself that today wasn't about the past. His job was to keep the lights steady and systems alive. That was all. Wes nudged him. Can't believe we're standing this close to billionaires and politicians. Callan's eyes stayed on the output gauges. Keep your head down. These people forget we exist until something breaks. He didn't realize how true that sentence would become. Midway through Vera's presentation, the air conditioning compressor above the booth sputtered, sending a faint tremor through the floor. Callan glanced at the monitor. Voltage spike, minimal but odd. He noted it, preparing to reroute current if necessary. Then came the sound no one expected. The faint click of a microphone dropping, followed by silence that swallowed the atrium. Vera's voice had stopped mid-sentence. Callan looked up. She stood frozen for a moment, one hand pressed against her ribs. Then she swayed, knees buckling, and fell forward. The crowd gasped as the CEO of Langstone Dynamics collapsed under 1,000 lights. Vale jumped from his seat near the front, sprinting toward her, but the crowd surged with panic. Security rushed the stage, blocking access. Callan's headset crackled with distorted shouts. Power surges, signal interference, emergency protocol failures. The voltage warning on his console flashed red. He didn't think. He moved. Within seconds, he was out of the booth, pushing past startled guests. The security guard barked, "Authorized personnel only." But Callan was already vaulting the barrier. He landed beside Vera as Vale struggled to restart the monitor, which was dead from the same power fluctuation. "She's not breathing right," Vale muttered, checking for a pulse. "Cardiac rhythms unstable. No data feed." Callan's tone was calm, surgical. "I've got her. Get me space and silence." The room stilled under command. He didn't shout but radiated. He loosened Vera's collar, rolled her onto her back, and tilted her chin. "Airways clear. Need saline and oxygen now." Vale blinked, realization dawning. "You've done this before." Callan didn't answer. He placed 2 fingers at the base of Vera's throat and counted aloud, his rhythm matching the measured breaths he guided into her lungs. "Come on," he murmured. "You've done harder things than this." The cameras zoomed in. Somewhere near the back, an intern recognized him, the same man from the maintenance roster. Phones lifted, recording. The billionaire on the floor, the mechanic kneeling beside her, his uniform stained with grease and focus. Vale crouched beside him. "I know you," he whispered. "You're the donor." Callan's hands never faltered. "Doesn't matter right now. She needs fluids. I said saline, not assumptions." Callan interrupted, his voice low but final. "She's overheating. The system feeding her monitor pulled too much current through the integrated line. That's what fried the circuit and triggered her arrhythmia." Vale stared. "How do you—" "I built field hospitals out of scrap metal," Callan replied, pressing 2 fingers against Vera's wrist. "Now, either help or move." The crowd's panic began to shift into silence. The only sound was his voice counting under his breath, steady as a metronome. Every movement carried the precision of memory. Pressure on the carotid, controlled breathing, muscle checks. Vera's pulse stuttered, then caught. Her chest rose once, unevenly, then again. Callan leaned close, voice almost a whisper. "Stay with me. You've still got things to fix." She gasped faintly. The murmur of the crowd rose again. Vale grabbed the portable medkit just arriving from backstage. "She's stabilizing." Callan sat back, sweat shining on his temples. Security moved in, trying to guide him away, but Vale stopped them. "He stays until she's transferred," he said sharply. Reporters pressed against the barriers, cameras flashing. In that instant, the world saw the story unfold. The billionaire whose life had been saved by the anonymous man who'd once given her a part of himself. When the paramedics arrived, Callan quietly backed away, letting them take over. His hands trembled now, not from fear, but from the echo of adrenaline. Vale approached, lowering his voice. "You knew what to do faster than my staff. That isn't coincidence." Callan met his eyes. "It's history." Vale nodded slowly. "I'll see to it she knows who you are." "Don't," Callan said. "She doesn't need a name. She just needs to recover." But it was already too late. The moment had been caught by every lens in the room. His face, his calm, his words, broadcast within minutes. Back in the booth, Wes watched the feed replay in stunned silence. "Holy hell," he whispered. "That's you." Callan removed his headset, the sound of sirens below fading. "Yeah," he said softly. "Guess it is." He didn't stay for interviews or applause. He walked out through the loading bay, past the polished cars and glass reflections, his heartbeat still sinking to the rhythm of hers that he'd once carried. Somewhere behind him, in the ambulance, Vera Langstone opened her eyes. Her first word, faint but deliberate, was, "Find him." The world learned his name before he was ready to hear it himself. Overnight, the headlines flooded every network. Anonymous mechanic identified as hero donor behind CEO's life-saving surgery. News anchors repeated his words from the stage. "She's done harder things than this," as if they were a motto for hope. But to Callan, they were just reflex, born from habit, not heroism. When he woke the next morning, sunlight filtered through blinds, cutting lines across the living room floor. Mara was still asleep on the couch, her blanket half off, the news replaying quietly on TV. His own face filled the screen, frozen mid-focus, kneeling beside Vera Langstone. The caption read, "Callan Doran, single father and former combat medic, saved CEO twice." He muted the sound immediately. The quiet that followed was heavier than noise. Fame wasn't a medal, it was exposure, the kind that left no room for peace. His phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters, old friends, unknown numbers. Even his garage voicemail overflowed. He didn't answer a single one. The last time the world had paid attention to him was the day his wife's medical claim was denied. He had learned then that recognition didn't fix anything. It just made private pain public. When Mara stirred awake, she rubbed her eyes, blinking at the muted TV. "That's you," she said softly. "Why are they showing you?" He forced a smile. "Guess people like good stories." "You saved her again." He hesitated. "Looks that way." She smiled proudly, but he saw the shadow of worry behind it. "Does that mean she'll say thank you?" He didn't answer. He didn't know if gratitude could exist in a world where every kindness was branded, monetized, turned into PR. By late afternoon, his phone rang again. Unknown number, corporate extension. He ignored it. It rang again, then again. Finally, he picked up. "Mr. Doran." The voice was polite but firm. "This is Natalie from Langston Dynamics. Ms. Langstone would like to see you, personally." He took a slow breath. "She should be resting." "She's recovering well," Natalie said carefully. She insisted on speaking with you privately. Tomorrow morning, if you're available." He didn't respond right away. He wasn't ready for that meeting, the conversation that would drag the past out into the light. Still, there was a quiet inevitability in her tone, like a tide pulling him forward. "I'll come," he said finally. That night, he barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the stage replayed, the lights, the silence, the heartbeat beneath his palms. But what haunted him more was the realization that the woman he'd once saved in anonymity was also tied, however distantly, to the systems that had failed his family. Life had a cruel symmetry. Morning arrived gray and heavy with rain. He drove to the Langstone Medical Wing through flooded streets, the windshield wipers ticking like a metronome. Security met him at the entrance, escorting him through pristine hallways that smelled faintly of antiseptic and wealth. Vera waited in a private recovery suite overlooking the city. She wore no makeup this time, no armor of power, just a hospital gown and a blanket draped across her legs. For the first time, she looked small against the skyline she owned. When he entered, she didn't speak immediately. She studied him with a gaze neither defensive nor superior, just searching. "You shouldn't have left the gala so fast," she said softly. "I didn't even get to thank you." He shook his head. "You don't owe me thanks." "I do," she insisted. "More than once." He looked down, uneasy under her sincerity. "You should rest." "Rest doesn't fix what I did." Her voice faltered just slightly. "Dr. Vale told me everything. About the donor registry, about the match. It was you, wasn't it?" He said nothing, but silence was answer enough. Vera exhaled slowly, her composure slipping for the first time. "You gave me part of your body without knowing who I was. Then you saved me again in front of the world, and I—" She hesitated, almost ashamed. "I treated you like staff." "It doesn't matter," he said. "You had no reason to know." Her eyes softened. "Still, it's strange, isn't it? You saved me twice before I ever saw you as a person." He met her gaze finally. "Maybe that's how most people are saved, by strangers they never really see." She didn't reply right away. The rain on the glass filled the silence between them. "You lost someone," she said quietly. "Vale mentioned your wife." He nodded once. "She died waiting for approval. Insurance said her treatment wasn't cost-effective." Vera flinched. "Langstone was one of the underwriters back then," she whispered. "We cut coverage to maintain growth metrics. I signed those policies." For a long moment, neither spoke. Callan didn't lash out, didn't raise his voice. His silence carried more weight than anger ever could. Finally, he said, "You didn't know me. You just knew numbers. I stopped expecting numbers to care." Vera's throat tightened. "Then why help me?" He looked out the window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. "Because someone has to stop the cycle. If I start choosing who deserves help, I become the same system that broke her." Her breath caught. The answer left no room for defense. When he finally stood to leave, she said his name softly. "Colin." He turned back. "I can't undo what I signed," she said, "but I can change what comes next. I intend to." He gave a small nod. "Then that'll be enough." As he stepped into the corridor, Vale waited with an approving look. "You didn't just save her life," the doctor said. "You changed it." Callan didn't answer. Outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time in years, he felt something close to quiet, not forgiveness, but release. The next move wouldn't be his, it would be hers. And that was how redemption began. For 2 days, Callan stayed off the grid. He left his phone face down, turned off notifications, and avoided every headline carrying his name. The garage stayed closed, its Back Monday sign curling at the edges in the humidity. Mara thought he was sick. He let her think so. In truth, he just needed quiet. Every time his mind replayed Vera's words, "I signed those policies," his stomach turned. It wasn't rage. It was something heavier, quieter, like grief that had circled back, wearing a new face. By Sunday, Mara's persistence broke through the fog. "Daddy," she said, tugging his sleeve, "you forgot to fix my drawing." He blinked. "Your what?" "The heart picture, the corner ripped." She brought it from her backpack, the same one that had lived on their fridge for years. Half blue, half red, his donation, her reminder. The tear ran through the middle, but she'd taped it carefully. "I told Mrs. Lane at school you gave someone a piece of your heart," she said proudly. "She said that makes you kind of magic." He smiled despite himself. "Magic, huh?" She nodded solemnly. "Real magic doesn't ask for thank yous." He stared at the taped drawing long after she skipped off to watch cartoons. The edges had started to fade, but the colors still met cleanly at the seam. That picture, he realized, wasn't about loss. It was proof that something broken could still hold. Late that afternoon, a black sedan stopped outside the house. No press logo this time. Just tinted windows and a driver who stepped out wearing a corporate badge. Callan stiffened. "Can I help you?" "Delivery from Langstone Dynamics," the driver said, handing him a sealed envelope. Inside was a simple note on white stationery. "Mr. Doran, there's a child's drawing taped beside my hospital bed. I think you'll want it back. If you're willing, bring Mara with you. She should see where her kindness ended up. VL." He folded the note, exhaling through his teeth. He didn't want to step back into her world, the gleaming halls, the sterile apologies, but the mention of Mara changed everything. Some lessons, he realized, were better shown than explained. The next morning, he drove them into the city. Mara pressed her face to the window as the tower came into view. "It's so shiny," she whispered. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Shiny doesn't always mean safe." Security waved them through without delay this time. The elevator ride to the top was silent, except for the hum of machinery and Mara's soft hum of excitement. When the doors opened, Vera Langstone herself stood waiting. No entourage, no assistants. She wore simple clothes, pale still but grounded. Her left hand rested lightly against her abdomen, an unspoken reminder of the shared history between them. "Mara," she said warmly, kneeling a little. "You must be the artist." Mara smiled shyly and held up a new version of the heart drawing. "I made you another one. This time, I added gold lines so it won't tear again." Vera's eyes softened. "That's beautiful. May I keep it?" Mara nodded. Callan stayed a few steps back, observing the exchange. He'd expected awkwardness or staged gratitude. Instead, what he saw felt genuine, a woman trying to rebuild from sincerity, not obligation. Vera gestured toward the large window that framed the city skyline. "I wanted her to see this," she said quietly. "This view used to mean victory to me. Now it feels more like responsibility." He followed her gaze. The streets below looked distant, miniature. "Perspective changes with height," he said. "Doesn't always make things clearer." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why I invited you up here, to help me see ground level again." They walked together to the adjoining medical suite. There, taped on the wall near her recovery bed, hung Mara's original drawing, the faded one he thought was still at home. A nurse must have retrieved it after the gala. The tear down the middle was visible but sealed with surgical tape instead of paper. "I kept it," Vera said softly. It reminded me that what keeps this company alive isn't profit. It's people like you. People who fix what breaks quietly. Callan studied the drawing, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to hearing words like gratitude delivered without a crowd or cameras. Mara reached for his hand. See, Daddy? She fixed it too. He chuckled quietly. Looks that way. Vera turned toward him. Dr. Vale says you're turning down interviews. You could use that platform for change, you know. I fix engines, not policies. You fix more than that. Her tone was gentle but firm. You reminded an entire company what compassion looks like when it's real. I want to build something lasting from that. Not charity, a partnership. He raised an eyebrow. Partnership? I'm starting a foundation. The Langstone Foundation for Donor Families. Healthcare support, scholarships, training for, first, responders. I want you involved, not as a symbol, but as someone who understands why it matters. Callan glanced down at Mara, whose eyes sparkled with the kind of hope he hadn't seen since his wife's funeral. I'm no executive, he said. Good, Vera replied. Executives talk, you act. The room fell quiet again, filled with the hum of hospital machines. He finally said, I'll think about it. She nodded. That's all I ask. Before they left, Vera pressed a folded paper into Mara's hands. Something for your art box. In the elevator, Mara unfolded it. A handwritten note with one sentence. Magic exists when kindness doesn't keep score. Callan smiled faintly. She's learning fast. So are you, Mara said, leaning against him. You're smiling again. He looked at her taped heart drawing, glowing in the elevator's mirrored light. Maybe kindness didn't fix everything, but it had a way of mending the edges. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. Outside, the sky had cleared to a sharp, forgiving blue. The tower's reflection rippled across puddles as they walked to the car. In the glass, their figures appeared small beside the monolith of wealth, but not insignificant. Behind them, at the top-floor window, Vera watched them go, one hand on the taped heart beside her bed. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. The quiet understanding between them said everything words couldn't. Vera Langstone's recovery made front-page headlines again, but this time the story wasn't about the collapse. It was about change. Her PR team tried to control the narrative. Langstone CEO thanks mechanic who saved her life. Yet beneath the polished wording, something real had begun to shift. She had canceled half her board meetings, quietly rewriting the structure of the company that had once made her untouchable. Callan didn't watch the news anymore, but he felt the ripple effects everywhere. New contracts arrived for the garage, all bearing the Langstone seal. Donations began flooding the donor registry, where he'd signed up years ago. He wanted to believe the attention meant progress, not spectacle. Still, part of him wondered how long sincerity could survive under spotlights. He found out soon enough when Dr. Vale called again. She's reopening the summit, Vale said. But this time it's not about technology. It's about what she calls human infrastructure. She wants you there. I'm not a speaker, Callan replied. She doesn't want a speech, Vale said. She wants truth. That single word sat heavy in his mind for hours after the call. Truth had never been his enemy, only the silence surrounding it. Maybe it was time to break that silence, not with grand statements, but by standing beside the woman who had learned, finally, what humility meant. 2 days later, he and Mara returned to the tower. Reporters swarmed the entrance again, but the energy was different this time. Curious, not predatory. Inside, the atmosphere was subdued. No champagne, no orchestral fanfare, no investors flashing smiles. Instead, rows of employees filled the atrium, their name badges reflecting the soft amber light. Vera stood near the stage, wearing no jewelry, no makeup, only a charcoal suit that made her look more human than powerful. When she saw them, her eyes brightened slightly. "You came." "Couldn't exactly say no to the person holding my daughter's art hostage," he teased gently. That earned a small, genuine laugh, something rare from her. "She's the only artist who's ever made me cry." Mara beamed. "That means you're getting better." "I hope so," Vera said. Vale gestured them toward reserved seats at the side. The presentation began differently this time. No slogans, no projections. Vera stepped to the microphone and took a slow breath. "When this company started, I believed efficiency was compassion, that if we worked hard enough we could calculate care. I was wrong." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Executives weren't supposed to admit mistakes. She continued, voice steady. "I was saved twice by the same man, once through a medical act of generosity, once through an act of courage. Both times he had nothing to gain and everything to lose. He reminded me that systems don't save people. People save people." The crowd fell silent. Callan felt every pair of eyes turned toward him, but he didn't move. Recognition didn't matter. What mattered was that she believed what she was saying. Vera motioned to the screen behind her. A simple logo appeared, the Langstone Foundation for Donor Families. "This is our new focus," she said. "Healthcare access, emergency response training, and full coverage policies for the workers who keep us alive, literally and figuratively." The applause began hesitantly, then grew until the hall echoed. Callan didn't clap. He just watched her, the same way he'd watched her heartbeat steady under his hands that night. After the event, she found him by the corridor. "You didn't clap," she said softly. "Didn't need to," he replied. "You didn't do it for applause." She smiled faintly. "You're right, I did it because I'm tired of pretending that profit absolves guilt." They stood there for a long moment in companionable quiet, until Vale approached, holding a small envelope. "She insisted you get this," he said, handing it to Callan. Inside was an official document naming him as an advisor to the foundation. Not a ceremonial title, a salaried position with authority to oversee ethical compliance. "You don't have to take it," Vera said. "But I need someone who won't lie to me." Callan looked at her, weighing the offer. "You realize I'm not going to agree with everything you do. I'm counting on it." Mara tugged at his sleeve. "Can we help too?" Vera crouched down. "We'll need lots of artists to make the offices look less boring." Mara grinned. "I can do that." For the first time, the future felt less like a weight and more like a bridge. The woman who had once represented everything Callan distrusted was learning to build something real, and he, who had sworn off hope, found himself willing to step across. As they left the tower that evening, the air was cooler, washed clean by another round of rain. Mara skipped ahead, humming, her shoes splashing through puddles that reflected the building's new logo. Callan lingered behind, watching his reflection blur in the water. He had saved lives before, but this felt different. This wasn't about stopping death, it was about restoring meaning. Vera watched them from the upper balcony, one hand on the glass, the other over the place beneath her ribs where his kidney beat steady beside her own. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in her survival. She felt connected, to the man walking below, to the child carrying a gold-lined heart, to the quiet rhythm that tied them all together. And that connection, she realized, was the only kind of power worth keeping. The next few weeks moved like a tide neither of them could stop. What began as an awkward alliance between a billionaire and a mechanic had turned into something resembling momentum. The Langstone Foundation opened its temporary headquarters in a renovated community building, far from glass towers, close to the people it was meant to help. Callan insisted on that location. "If you're trying to rebuild trust," he told Vera, "you start where it was broken." She didn't argue. She just showed up every morning, coffee in one hand, sleeves rolled up. Dr. Vale handled logistics, but Callan handled reality. He trained staff on emergency response procedures, taught basic first aid to volunteers, and even rebuilt half the facility's wiring himself after the contractors overcharged. Mara often joined him after school, coloring quietly in the corner while her father rewired what he used to call the heart of the building. Vera watched him sometimes from her glass-walled office, no longer cornered in luxury but surrounded by working noise, drills, voices, laughter. She didn't interrupt often. Instead, she observed the difference between leadership and presence. She'd spent years commanding attention. Now she was learning to earn it. One afternoon, while reviewing budget drafts, she heard voices raised in the hall. Callan was arguing with the senior accountant, a man in a tailored suit who clearly wasn't used to being corrected by someone in work boots. "You can't move those funds from the donor outreach line," Callan said firmly. "That's not overhead. That's the point of the foundation." The accountant sneered. "You're not authorized to make those calls. Ms. Langstone hasn't signed off on any operational budgets yet." "Then call her," Callan said, unflinching. Vera appeared before the man could. "He doesn't need my signature for that," she said evenly. "His decision stands." The accountant hesitated. "Ma'am, with all due respect—" "With all due respect," she interrupted. "I trust the person who's been saving lives longer than you've been balancing books." The man backed down, muttering something about protocol, and disappeared down the corridor. Callan turned to her. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," she said, "I did. I hired you to challenge systems, not obey them." He looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "Then you'd better be ready for honesty." "I've lived long enough on lies," she said. That night, they worked late drafting guidelines for the Foundation's transparency pledge. It wasn't glamorous work, charts, metrics, auditing, but it was real. Around midnight, when the lights flickered in the hallway, Callan went to check the circuit. He found Mara asleep on a bench near the break room, her drawing pad resting on her lap. The latest sketch was of a building with people holding hands outside it. Langstone's logo above the door, a heart glowing behind the windows. When he carried her to the car later, Vera followed them to the parking lot. "She's the reason you kept going, isn't she?" He nodded. "Everything I do circles back to her." Vera smiled faintly. "Then she's the Foundation's true north." For a while, their lives settled into rhythm. Meetings, site visits, outreach programs. It felt almost normal until the letter arrived. It was addressed to the Langstone Foundation Board. The handwriting was precise, the tone colder than ink could usually carry. It came from one of Vera's former partners, Leonard Greaves, who had resigned after the first summit debacle. The message was simple. Cease public operations or face an audit for financial misconduct during the transition of Langstone Dynamics. Vera read it twice, jaw tightening. "He's bluffing," she said. Callan leaned over her shoulder. "Is he?" "Technically, no," she admitted. "He still has partial access to legacy accounts. If he digs, he might find things that look worse than they are." "Then we handle it head-on," Callan said. "No PR spin. Transparency starts with confrontation." She gave a dry laugh. "You really don't understand business politics." "I understand truth," he replied. "And if you keep hiding it, he wins." Vale entered midway through their discussion, reading the tension instantly. If Greaves pushes this public, he could tank your foundation before it stabilizes. Vera rubbed her temples. He's betting I'll protect the Langstone name over the mission. Callan crossed his arms, then call his bet. The silence that followed was long, taut. Finally, she nodded. Press conference tomorrow. Full disclosure. Everything, past errors, current finances, even my part in the insurance failures. If I lose the board, so be it. Vale looked stunned. That could ruin your remaining assets. It could, she said, glancing at Callan, or it could prove we've actually changed. The next day, the Foundation's atrium filled again with cameras. Callan stood behind the scenes, Mara sitting quietly beside him with her sketchbook. Vera stepped up to the podium, no script in hand, only a thin folder of documents. Before this foundation began, she said, I built an empire on numbers, efficiency ratios, profit margins, coverage probabilities. What I never calculated was consequence. She paused, steadying herself. Today, we're opening our books, every ledger, every line. The mistakes I made as CEO are here for anyone to see. Transparency isn't charity, it's accountability. The room buzzed as reporters flipped through the distributed papers. Callan watched her hands tremble slightly, then steady again as she continued. This foundation exists because a man who should have hated me chose instead to act with compassion. His gift didn't just save my life, it forced me to face what I'd destroyed. That's why every donation from now on will go directly to the people who need it most, with public tracking available to anyone who asks. No more invisible suffering. When the conference ended, Vera stepped down from the stage and exhaled deeply. Callan met her halfway. You just made a lot of enemies, he said quietly. Good, she replied. I spent too long surrounded by the wrong friends. As they left together, Vale called after them. You realize Greaves will come after you personally now. Vera smiled faintly. Then it's his turn to learn what happens when truth fights back. Outside, the sky rolled with thunder, but it didn't feel like a storm, more like a cleansing. Callan glanced down at Mara's sketch, where lightning split the clouds above a glowing heart. Looks like your drawing's predicting the weather again, he said. She grinned. It's the good kind of thunder. For the first time, he believed her. The fallout began before sunrise. By the time Vera arrived at the foundation the next morning, her inbox overflowed with messages from shareholders, attorneys, and journalists. Headlines spun the story in every direction. Langstone admits corporate negligence, CEO's redemption or collapse, but none of them captured what really mattered. For the first time, people were talking about the lives lost in the insurance scandal instead of the profits made from it. Callan walked into her office carrying 2 coffees. He'd already been there an hour, repairing a power relay that had blown overnight. You made the front page, he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. Twice. She didn't look up from her screen. Half the board's threatening to dissolve the foundation. The other half wants to sell my shares before the market drops. He shrugged. Let them. You built this place to tell the truth. Truth's supposed to hurt before it helps. She finally looked at him. You sound like Vale. Vale didn't spend the last 10 years fixing other people's messes with duct tape. That made her laugh, faint but real. You're impossible. Efficient, he corrected. Impossible's what got you here in the first place. The intercom buzzed before she could respond. Miss Langstone, her assistant said nervously. Leonard Greaves is here to see you. The air in the room tightened. Callan set down his cup. Guess the thunder came faster than expected. Vera took a steadying breath. Send him in. Leonard entered like a man who still believed ownership came with moral immunity. Silver hair, pressed suit, a faint smirk that reeked of entitlement. He closed the door himself and leaned against it, inspecting the two of them as if walking into a courtroom he already owned. Quite the performance yesterday, he said. You always did enjoy center stage. I told the truth, Vera replied evenly. You jeopardized an entire corporation's legacy. Legacy built on denial isn't worth keeping. Leonard's smirk hardened. You think your little charity stunt makes you untouchable? I have years of internal documentation. Do you know what happens when I leak that to regulators? Callan stepped forward. You're threatening the woman who just confessed her own mistakes publicly. Kind of ruins your leverage, doesn't it? Leonard turned surprised. And you must be the janitor with a hero complex. Mechanic, Callan said. Different toolbox, same principle, cleaning up messes. The older man sneered. You don't belong in these conversations. Vera rose slowly, eyes sharp. He belongs wherever truth does. Leonard's voice sharpened. You're naive if you think this new image will survive scrutiny. Every transaction from the old board is still traceable to you. When they audit— Already done, she interrupted, sliding a folder across the desk. We published the internal audit before you got here. Everything's in there, including your bonus structure during the claim denials. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't. I already did, she said. You wanted transparency. You got it. For a moment, silence filled the office like pressure before a storm. Then Leonard's confidence cracked. You'll drag us all down. No, Vera said quietly. You dragged us down years ago. I'm just showing the world the depth. He turned on his heel, slamming the door behind him. Callan exhaled slowly. That was effective. Vera leaned against the desk, trembling now that the adrenaline ebbed. He's going to retaliate, you know that. Let him, Callan said. You've already taken his weapon. Truth cuts sharper than blackmail. She smiled faintly. You make it sound noble. It's not noble. It's necessary. That evening, while the building emptied, Callan found her still working under the soft glow of the desk lamp. The skyline outside bled orange into indigo. You should go home, he said. So should you. I don't have a driver waiting, he replied with a small grin. She looked up. I used to think power meant never being afraid. Now I know it's the opposite. It's choosing to act despite the fear. He leaned against the doorframe. Then you're finally powerful. Her gaze softened. And you're finally here, not running from ghosts. He hesitated. Maybe, but ghosts have long memories. Vale appeared at the doorway then, holding his tablet. You'll both want to see this. He turned the screen around. A live feed of the Foundation's social page. Thousands of comments flooded in, not about stocks or scandal, but about hope. Families thanking them for reinstated coverage, medics volunteering, former Langstone employees pledging support. The tide was turning, not fast, but enough to see the current change direction. Vera stared at the screen. We might actually survive this. You will, Vale said, because you stopped pretending survival's the goal. When he left, Callan moved closer to the window. The city lights reflected faintly in the glass, merging his face with hers. What happens now? He asked. Now, she said, we rebuild. And after that— She turned toward him, her expression calm, certain. We make sure no one forgets why we started. He thought of Mara's drawing, the gold-lined heart, the lightning above it, and nodded. Then we're going to need stronger tape. Her laugh came easier this time. Something tells me you've got plenty." Outside, thunder rolled again, low and distant. Rain began to fall, streaking the glass with thin rivers of light. Vera stood beside him, neither powerful nor powerless, just human, finally. For Kalen, that was enough proof the crisis had been worth surviving. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like someone patching broken systems. He felt like part of something still learning how to heal. When they left the office, the city shimmered under rain. Mara waited in the car, drawing another heart. This time, she used no tape at all. It didn't need mending anymore. It simply held whole, because it had already been tested. 2 weeks after Leonard's confrontation, the world began testing Vera's redemption the way it always tested sincerity, by trying to break it. News outlets alternated between praise and doubt, questioning whether the foundation was genuine or just a public distraction from deeper crimes. Online forums called her the contrite queen of exploitation. Investors withdrew, regulators circled, and activists demanded that Kalen, the working-class hero, denounce her publicly. He ignored the messages. Words didn't fix systems. Action did. But he could feel the strain tightening around everyone in the building. Donations slowed, volunteers hesitated, and even Mara noticed the heaviness when she came by after school. "Why is everyone so quiet?" she whispered one evening. "They're waiting," Callan said. "For what?" "For proof that the change isn't just a speech." He didn't know then how literal those words would become. That Friday afternoon, an alarm sounded through the foundation. Shrill, mechanical, urgent. Callan dropped his wrench and ran. The main server room was filled with smoke and the sharp smell of burning insulation. Sparks hissed near the floor vents, the sound too rhythmic to be accidental. When he pulled open the nearest panel, he found a timed ignition device. Small, professional, designed to short-circuit the power grid before triggering the sprinklers. He yanked the wires free, cutting the circuit before it could complete. Fire suppression systems roared to life anyway, releasing thick mist across the room. The alarms drew everyone outside. By the time the fire department arrived, the worst had been prevented, but barely. The damage was contained to a single floor. Vera stood near the evacuation line, coughing through the haze, clutching her phone. "Leonard?" she asked when Kalen reached her. He nodded grimly. Had to be. No amateur could have placed something that clean. Vale joined them, face pale. "He's trying to discredit the safety certifications. If this leaks before the next audit, the foundation's finished." Vera turned to Kalen. "Can we restore power? Maybe by morning. But if the backups are fried, all your public ledgers are gone." She closed her eyes. "Everything we built erased overnight." Callan shook his head. "Not erased, just buried. We dig it back." He spent the night inside the server room, sleeves rolled up, cables snaking across the floor. Mara slept on a folding chair in the hallway, wrapped in his jacket. Vera refused to leave either, sitting against the glass wall, her silhouette haloed by the emergency lights. Near dawn, Kalen found the last connection point intact. "We got lucky," he murmured. "Data's still in the redundancy drives." Vera looked up, exhausted but alert. "You can recover it?" "Yeah," he said, "but I'll need a clean terminal in time." "Take mine," she said, standing. "If anyone tries to stop you, they answer to me." The phrase held no arrogance now, only conviction. By mid-morning, Vale arrived with coffee and news. "Police found a vehicle registered to Greaves' Shell Company near the loading dock. He's gone into hiding." Vera rubbed her temples. "Of course he has." Callan didn't pause his typing. "He'll resurface when he thinks we're cornered." And when he does? Vale asked. Kellen's jaw tightened. Then we make sure he's the one exposed. The recovery took 14 hours. When the servers rebooted, the system displayed a simple message: integrity verified. All financial data remained intact. The Foundation could prove its transparency, proof Greaves couldn't destroy. Vera sank into a chair, trembling. You saved it. He gave a tired half-smile. You built it. I just refused to let someone burn it down. Mara woke and shuffled in, rubbing her eyes. Is it over? For now, he said, lifting her into his lap. But it's a good ending to this chapter. Vera leaned back against the wall, studying them, father and daughter, calm amid chaos. You always seem to know what to do, she said softly. He shrugged. Experience teaches you that panic's just noise. She looked at the floor. I spent years thriving on noise. Then maybe it's time you listen instead. Later that evening, when the last technician left, Vera approached him again. I made you a promise the day you came back that we'd build something lasting. I still mean that. You already did, he said. You built trust. Her expression softened. Then help me keep it. I want you on the board, not as a figurehead, as an equal. He hesitated. That's not my world. It wasn't mine either, until it broke me, she replied. But you've lived the reality I ignored. I need that truth inside the room. He studied her a moment, then nodded slowly. Then I'll stand with you, as long as the mission stays clean. Then we'll make it so, she said. That night, rain swept through the city again, washing soot from the tower's facade. From the roof, Kalen watched lightning flicker over the skyline, illuminating the Foundation's illuminated logo. Behind the light, servers hummed steadily, the sound of survival through resilience and intention. Vera joined him quietly. Vale says the press wants another statement, she murmured. Let them wait, he replied. Some stories don't need speeches. She folded her arms, gazing at the horizon. Greaves will come again. Probably, Kalen said, but now you're not alone when he does. For a long moment, they stood side by side in silence, the storm softening to drizzle. Below them, Mara's drawing, now framed in the lobby, caught the faint reflection of lightning. The gold heart gleamed where the light hit, still taped, still whole. Vera smiled faintly. Do you ever think about fate? He shook his head. No, just choices. Fate's what people blame when they stop making them. She nodded slowly. Then we'll keep choosing. Down in the lobby, the generator's lights steadied to green. Against all odds, the system was alive again. Imperfect, human, and humming with the quiet proof that something good had survived the fire. A month later, the city finally exhaled. The Foundation's numbers stabilized, donations flowed again, and even the most cynical commentators began to acknowledge that the Langstone experiment had survived everything thrown at it. The fire investigation confirmed what everyone suspected. Greaves had orchestrated it. He was arrested outside the country, caught trying to move money through an offshore account. Justice hadn't just found him, it had cornered him. Vera refused to celebrate. This isn't victory, she told Kalen quietly the day the news broke. It's consequence. Victory is what we build next. He understood. The press wanted sound bites, but she wanted permanence. Together, they walked through the newly repaired lobby. Bright, unscarred, but not perfect. The burn marks near the baseboards had been deliberately left visible, sealed under a transparent resin layer. Let them stay, Kalen had told the contractors. People should remember what almost happened. Mara's drawing hung above the reception desk now, framed in dark oak, gold heart gleaming beneath a small plaque that read, "Some gifts never stop giving." Visitors often paused there, taking photos or simply staring, unaware that the artist sometimes sat at the cafe across the street, sketching new things while her father and Vera shaped the foundation's future inside. That afternoon, a storm gathered outside. Callan was in the server wing, testing the emergency backup. Vera joined him, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, no trace left of the pristine executive she used to be. "The rain always waits for big days," she said. He smiled. "Maybe it likes drama. This time, it can't take anything from us." "You sound sure." "I'm learning from the best," she said, meaning it. Vale entered a moment later with a tablet in hand. "Press is outside again," he said. "They want a statement about the conviction." Vera looked at Callan. "You speak this time." He blinked. "I'm not your spokesperson." "No," she said. "You're the voice people trust. They'll listen to you more than to me." He sighed. "You really think they care what a mechanic has to say?" "I think they care what honesty sounds like." Minutes later, they stepped outside into the drizzle. Reporters gathered behind barriers, microphones raised. Callan took the podium Vera once used, his clothes still streaked with grease from the repair floor. Cameras flashed, expecting a speech. He gave them something simpler. "You already know what happened," he began. "You've seen the headlines, the trials, the debates. But what you don't see are the people walking through those doors every day. People who get care they were once denied. That's the real story, not redemption, not scandal, just repair." He paused, letting the rain fall on his shoulders. "Systems break because people forget they're made for people. If you remember that, you don't need to rebuild everything, just enough to start again." Then he stepped back. No rehearsed slogans, no applause lines. The reporters shouted more questions, but he didn't answer. Beside him, Vera smiled. A private smile, the kind that said she finally understood what real strength sounded like. That evening, the storm cleared, leaving the city washed and new. Callan found Mara waiting on the lobby steps, her sketchbook open to a fresh page. "Drawing again?" he asked. She nodded. "It's us this time, you, me, and Miss Langstone." He looked down at the sketch. 3 figures under an umbrella, a heart drawn above them in gold marker. "Pretty good," he said. "But you forgot the rain." "No," she replied, grinning. "I made it stop." Inside, Vera joined them, glancing at the drawing. "That's how I want people to see us," she said softly. "Not as survivors, but as something steady." For a moment, they stood together under the glow of the lobby lights, 3 lives tied by an act of unseen grace, proof that compassion could outlast even the worst designs of power. When they turned to leave, Callan caught one last glimpse of the plaque beneath Mara's framed heart. The resin reflected the light in fractured gold, like sunlight through storm water. He thought of his wife, the choices, the pain, the reason he kept giving pieces of himself away. Maybe kindness was a kind of inheritance too, passed quietly between strangers until it rebuilt the world piece by piece. As the automatic doors opened, the night air met them warm and clean. The streetlights shimmered through lingering puddles, and the tower behind them glowed like a second sunrise. Vera locked the doors, pocketed the key, and looked at him. "You were right," she said. "You can't buy redemption. You can only work for it." He smiled faintly. "Guess we're both still clocked in then." She laughed softly, the sound genuine this time. Together, they walked into the rain-washed street with Mara between them. Hands linked, steps unhurried, the kind of peace that comes only after surviving truth. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Title: Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?